if you give agents the way to stay with you, to be that brokerage for life, to succeed and realize their definition of success through different seasons of their business, through different seasons of their life, then you can stop that attrition. You can slow that attrition down, and that's how the brokerage can continue to grow.
Welcome to the Powerhouse Podcast. Today, I am talking to Robert Palmer. He is the founder and CEO of LPT Realty, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, excited to be here. It's kind of cool how this worked out, with you being local, and we're here at the LPT studio, and I'm really excited to be a guest on your podcast from our studio, and this is going to be great.
Yeah, I am literally about 4 miles maybe from home.
Yeah.
And I sat in today on the LPT Realty Motivational Monday session. So that was really fun. Got to learn a lot of great energy here. So thanks for inviting me.
It's been fun. We've been doing the Motivation Monday basically since we started the brokerage, maybe 4 or 5 months in, so a little over 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't missed a single one, neither has my co-host. No matter where we are, we log in every Monday, so every agent at LPT knows that Monday mornings at 11 Eastern, they're going to get updates on the market, updates on the brokerage from myself and our EVP, Matt Hodge, and that's our studio here. Matt's picture is actually on the wall behind you there. You're in his seat. If anyone's wondering, who that person is behind Tracey. But yeah, really excited and glad you got to sit in and see that. I think it's become a really important part of our culture and who we are. Being a cloud brokerage, the fact that probably about a third of our agents log in every Monday and watch the live Motivation Monday. And we have agents that have watch parties at their houses or at their local offices. It's just become a really, really interesting part of our culture and this uniting thing across the brokerage.
Yeah, definitely necessary in today's market for sure. Yeah. So I want to talk because I remember when I was at Florida Realtor Magazine getting a box called Listing Power Tools.
Yeah.
And that box has now turned into a brokerage. You also have RP funding, which is completely separate. And I do want to talk about that later because I think it's kind of a novel idea in the industry. But tell me how that evolution came from this marketing box to a brokerage.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm a marketing guy. I didn't have the success I had because I was the best mortgage guy. I was the best marketer, and I spent a lot of money, reinvested a lot of profits on TV advertising, and I always did a lot of direct mail and print marketing. And I was always a big believer in building that brand through print. And so I think the genesis for Listing Power Tools was I had a lot of friends that were real estate agents. We were adjacent to the real estate market through my mortgage company. And so we wanted to launch something to help agents be better marketers. I had a good friend who was an agent who was almost exclusively buyers, and I was trying to help him break into listings. And that was a big part of the box. The idea was an agent who's maybe trying to break into listings, who isn't that known farming, number one brand agent who sells the most houses in the neighborhood. How do we give them an unfair advantage to show up and win the listing? And that's really where the Power Pack came from. And what we found is if an agent goes in and overwhelms the seller with this amazing marketing, with this print collateral, these tangible things they can see and touch and feel, all of a sudden they would win more of those listings up against that kind of incumbent listing agent. And that was the genesis for the product, and had a lot of success with it. We grew it. We sold it as a subscription product, and then agents would buy the boxes from us. And I think one day I just kind of realized that I didn't love that relationship. I didn't love the idea that the agent who needed Listing Power Tools the most was also the agent who maybe couldn't afford the monthly fee, or the agent who couldn't afford to buy the boxes, because it really was about helping the little guy win, helping an agent break into listings. And so I think the real idea of saying, hey, if we become the brokerage, we don't have to charge those monthly fees anymore. We don't have to charge, for the box anymore. We're just going to win when they win. And I really love the way that relationship felt. And for me, that was the whole concept of saying, all right, we're basically going to wind down this really successful software as a service company and then relaunch it as a brokerage so that we can have a more unified relationship with our agents, our clients.
Yeah, and that was 3 years ago you started the brokerage, and now you are number 10 by transaction size and 14 by volume on the RealTrends verified brokerage rankings. So congratulations.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. We sat down and we actually made that a goal. We were like, hey, can we be top 10 in 3 years? And I think at the time there was a lot of skepticism around that. I mean, maybe I didn't even fully believe it. You look at how long it took most brokerages to break into the top 10, how long it takes most brokerages to scale to the size we've been able to do. And but that 3-year mark was really something we thought was reasonable, thought we could achieve it. And I would tell you by about March of last year, I knew we were going to do it, because again, the way the growth works, you see the growth coming, the transaction counts kind of lag the agent count. And so as much as a year ago, I knew all right, maybe we'll be 11, but we're going to be 10 or 11. And it started to feel real. And then it was this like, I don't know, this big moment of like anxiety leading up to the final announcement, because I'm like, man, as much as I will be proud of us if we're number 11, it's not 10. We want to be in the top 10. And so when the real trends came out and we were number 10 by transaction count, it was just this really, I think, great validation of the value we're bringing to our agents, the additional productivity that LPT agents are experiencing because of the tools, because of the culture, because of things like Motivation Monday. And so I'm very thankful for you guys for putting that out so we can kind of see that, so we can have that benchmark and understand where we fall in the industry.
Yeah, I will say that it took EXP and Compass both 7 years to get to number 1.
Okay.
So that's your, you got to beat that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's 7 years from when you guys started tracking them, right? That's not 7 years from
you're
opening.
right. It is 7. Well, I'm trying to think. I think it might have been 7 years from Compass's founding.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
We have to get,
not sure about
I gotta know where the goal line is.
I'll let you know. I have to check on that because I'm not actually sure.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about one thing that I think is pretty rare in today's brokerage world, is that you're self-funded. Yeah. I mean, that obviously used to be the way it went with Remax and even Keller at the, until recently.
Right.
But that doesn't generally happen in today's brokerage world. So tell me a little bit about that decision, why you chose that. And, I know that you're looking at an IPO this year. So talk to me a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I think really it was the commitment. Like I believe, like why do you take outside capital? One, I had the financial wherewithal from my success, in other businesses to be able to fund the company. And then beyond that, I believed in it. And I really wanted to retain the control so that I can make sure that I wake up every day putting our agents first, making sure that, while we are going to have this IPO in the next 12 months, that we're putting our agents first. I'll retain a majority shareholder and control the company, and self-funding it through the early days is the best way to do that. The earlier you take capital, the more diluted you are, the more control you lose. And so by my commitment to being willing to self-fund the company all the way through, and again, if you look at the amount of growth we've had doing that without outside capital, without any private equity money, without Wall Street money, most of the other brokerages were either already public when they hit the size that we've now hit, or haven't hit the scale at all. But I think, one, I believe, and two, I believe in our agents. I believe in our agents. They're the only other shareholders alongside me. I've had people offer me lots of money and try to buy into LPT. And as it sits today, the only way to be a shareholder is to be me, who cooked this whole thing up, or to be one of our agents who's earning shares through production, through attracting other agents to the brokerage. And again, we're on this amazing path to, when you look at the size and scale, we're already larger than most other brokerages when they had their IPOs. You look at, Real and EXP both went public through either reverse merger or pink sheets. Real did it in Canada. EXP did it with a failed mining company under the pink sheets. They were much smaller than us. Both those companies started trading publicly at somewhere around 1,000 agents, 1,500 agents. Then by the time they were our size, they had already uplisted to NASDAQ. And so our goal is just go straight for the big exchange from day one. We're looking at both New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. But to be able to have that, what I would call blue chip IPO, where we go public at the right size in order to put some capital on the balance sheet and really position ourselves with investors for that next leg of growth.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing we talked about in a previous interview is just scaling and plateauing. You have a huge ramp forward, obviously, but a lot of brokerages get to that plateau and they just don't grow anymore. And you had some ideas around that. And so I wanted to talk to you about, how do you feel like you're going to sustain the growth and keep growing?
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things is, the only market that we've been open in for all 3 years is Florida. And we started in Stellar. And so if you look right now, depending on which report you use, we're either number one or just under number one in agent count for Stellar. There's months where we're right there in top 2 or 3 in production. Again, production lags a little bit. It takes agents time to get into production. New construction deals they wrote a year ago are still going under their own brokerage. Old brokers, they haven't come to us yet. But the fact that we've been able to break in and hit that scale in just 3 years in Florida, and then if you look at Florida as a whole, we're in the top 2 or 3 by overall agent count already. And so we've been able to prove that our model can go deep. It gets dense in markets. It's one thing to say, hey, you reach 15,000 agents across 50 states. That's not a lot of agents per state, but we've been able to achieve very rapid growth and continue to scale deeply in Florida. And so we expect that to continue in other markets. What I realized as I looked at the brokerage landscape is it's not that brokerages stop growing because they stop attracting. It's because their attrition, the number of agents they're losing every month, equals the new agents joining. And that's where growth stops. It's not like all of a sudden people wake up and stop joining an EXP or whoever it is. It's that there's more agents leaving than are joining. And that's when you see agent count come down year over year. And so we studied and said, well, why do agents leave, right? Where do agents go? Why are they leaving brokerages? And a lot of the reason we found is that brokerage's model no longer fits that agent's definition of success. And that's a phrase I use a lot. I know I used a lot with you on the last podcast. This idea of individual definition of success is something I believe in as an entrepreneur. It's something we're deeply committed to impacting and supporting for our agents. And then that comes into the second concept with agent choice, letting agents choose. And so the idea at LPT is we have these different models that are built for agents at different arcs in their career. If you're interested in being a solo agent and you have no interest in attracting others to the brokerage, you don't want to be a team leader, you can get better economics. Other agents who do want to attract other agents, build an organization, build a team, have a branch office, be a mentor, they can have a different set of economics. And the cool thing is that agents can make a choice between those two. And now we're adding our third choice, which is Aperture, our standalone luxury brand, which is even another set of economics. But really, if you give agents the way to stay with you, to be that brokerage for life, to succeed and realize their definition of success through different seasons of their business, through different seasons of their life, then you can stop that attrition. You can slow that attrition down, and that's how the brokerage can continue to grow.
And what's the breakdown of agents as far as choosing which model they want?
Yeah, so the interesting, I guess, kind of caveat in there is team members. And so if you look at it at any brokerage, you look at an EXP, a team member can get a discounted cap. At Keller Williams, a team member can get a discounted cap. And so when we look at it, we lump the team members and their team leaders together into that one set of economics, even though they're on different caps. And it's about 50-50. Okay. So about 50% of the brokerage is either agents who have chosen to be on that what we call brokerage partner plan, where they can earn money from other agents, either being on a team with them, attract them into their organization, or those are their team members. And then the other half of the brokerage is the solo agent who is taking advantage of our 100% plan with our $5,000 cap. And that's pretty much how it breaks down.
Okay, that's interesting. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, which I think is fascinating because you own and still own a mortgage company, is that you don't believe first that single entity brokerages should be involved in mortgage or title. And that has been the rallying call for brokers for years. To be more profitable, you have to be in these mortgage, either joint ventures or owned mortgage or title. So tell me why you feel that way and how it's part of your strategy.
Yeah, I think it's one of the big moves as you've seen this new class of brokerage come along. Again, this single entity national brokerage. This is your Compasses, right? There's no franchises. Right. Compass owns the brokerage in every state they're licensed in. EXP and Real are the same. EXP owns the brokerage in every state and every country that they're licensed in. And I think that dynamic shift is really what moved that ability to impact, or even the right, in my opinion, impact mortgage and title away from the brokerage and then back to the local team leader, the local agents who are actually boots on the ground. Now, if you go look at the more legacy models, the Keller Williams local franchise owner, they absolutely have to monetize mortgage and title to make it work. The local Berkshire Hathaway office, the local Coldwell Banker office, the legacy franchises, because you have so much infrastructure and expense locked into this small geographic area, right? Like I own this one franchise. I have a few hundred agents. I have to have a leader, a recruiter. I have to have accounting people. I have to have trainers. It's very inefficient. And that's why the brokerage side struggles to make money. And then they're able to make that up through mortgage and title. And look, and because they're in their local market, they know who the best local mortgage guy is. They can build a relationship. They know who the best local title rep and title company is. They can build that relationship. Once you elevate to the cloud, once you go to that single entity brokerage, like a Compass, an EXP, a Real, an LPT, one, you now have the scale to actually earn profit on the brokerage side. You're not locked into this old model where you have too much overhead locked into one little market. If we need to drive more revenue, we open more states. We expand into new markets. The fact that at scale, I believe we can have 150,000 agents on a single brokerage platform. You do not need to monetize mortgage and title to make those economics work. And beyond that, I don't think you can succeed at monetizing mortgage and title because you're no longer in that local market, right? I don't know who the best mortgage person is in Arkansas. I don't know who the best mortgage person is in New York. I don't know who the best mortgage person is in San Antonio, Texas. Like, that's not my decision to make. It's not LPT's decision to make. And then what you see happen a lot of times is we would try to cut a deal, or our competitors would try to cut a deal with a national mortgage lender. Well, no national mortgage lender is the best for their agents in every market. There are certain markets where this lender is great and that lender is great. And so I believe strongly that the economics and the decision and the control of those relationships should live at the local level. And in the national entity ecosystem, the local level is the agents and the team leaders, the people who want to have their own little branch offices, the mentors. And so we are staying out of any type of monetization at that national scale level of mortgage and title, so we can let the local entrepreneur make the right choice for their business. And honestly, I think it's been a big part of our success and growth. Agents know that they're not coming here and they're going to worry about competing with our in-house lender. And it's funny because most people thought that was the whole reason I created LPT. Like, that was the initial narrative. Oh, Robert's launching this real estate brokerage just so he can steal everybody's mortgages, whatever. And I guess I was prepared for that because we'd already made the decision to completely firewall the two companies. I've pivoted RP Funding, my mortgage company, completely to refinancing and servicing so that we're not even competing in the purchase space with the agent's local preferred lenders. But I think it's a big part of the success. The entrepreneur who's drawn to LPT is the same entrepreneur who knows the best mortgage and title person in their market, and they don't want to feel like we're here to step on their toes. The idea that a national brokerage would offer incentives to try to take mortgage or title clients away from their agents, local lenders, and providers is something I think always upset me as a mortgage guy coming up. Like, I knew back in the day when I was a great mortgage guy in that market. I tell a story once. I drove an hour to get a water sample for a well test so we could close an FHA loan on time. No national call center guy is doing that. Yeah. And I want our agents to partner with that person, that loan officer, and that means we have to stay out of the way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Really, the story is the growth of the single entity national brokerage, honestly. I mean, if you look at the growth, I mean, you know, obviously, when you add franchises in with Keller, I think they're still the largest. Yeah. But it is interesting that some of the newer entrants into the rankings are the single entry. Yeah. Not always cloud-based either. Compass has,
right, absolutely,
you know, offices, and you do have some offices, right?
We have a lot. You know, our team leaders go out and start their own offices. It's interesting. You know, we launched and I guess when I use cloud, it's more the corporate infrastructure is cloud, right? The compliance is in the cloud. And if you look at Compass, it's similar. Every Compass office doesn't have a full accounting team and a full disbursement team. A lot of those services have been elevated to a corporate headquarters or a cloud level or whatever you want to call it, so that the offices we do have function more as just sales offices, right? They're not cutting commission checks. They're not checking file compliance. It's about meeting with customers and agent trainings and things. But I think when you look at scale, the power we have to disrupt, the power that we have as these single entity brokerages, the services we can provide for agents, the technology deals that we can negotiate, the scale we can bring really is unstoppable. And I think you're going to see a wider and wider gap between the commission splits, the technology offerings, the support offerings, education offerings at the legacy franchise brokerages and the single entity brokerages. And we're going to continue to pull further and further away, because the bigger we get, the more scale we have, the more we can do for our agents, and the harder it is for those legacy franchise brokerages to keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into like this big industry issue right now, which is the new delayed marketing option. And obviously you've got people on both sides, and Zillow and came out with, you know, their rules, and that you can't publicly market without being in their ecosystem. And then homes.com recently said the opposite. Yep. They don't agree with Zillow. Where do you stand on the whole clear cooperation and delayed marketing and private listing network?
Yeah, I think for me, it really comes down to this commitment to agent choice. Like, I have a lot of faith in our entrepreneurs, a lot of faith in our agents, and I want them to make that decision. Just like I want them to choose the right mortgage and title guy in their market, even though I'm a mortgage guy, I want them to make their own choices. And so I think on one hand, you know, I'm supportive of Zillow if they want to choose not to display those listings, you know, but I think at the same time too, and I think this was a smart piece of their policy, is they're not saying agents can't do it. They're just saying, hey, if you choose to do this, we're not going to display your listing. And I think I'm supportive of that overall, because it allows the agent to make the choice. You know, the consumer chose the agent to hire. Like, we all start with the consumer. And the consumer chose the agent that they trust, they believe is the best person to market their home. And now that agent has a choice to make. Are they going to choose to pre-market the home and then not be eligible for Zillow and potentially lose that audience? And that's going to weigh into agents' decision making. And maybe some say, you know what, for this situation, I will. This is a high net worth individual. This is someone who wants privacy. You know, I think at the end of the day, the power to make that choice should lie with the individual agent who the seller selected. And so this is one of those situations where I'm going to say LPT is not going to go out there and try to dictate to our agents. We're not going to tell our agents, hey, we're going to make this choice for you. I believe this is something that is very agent specific, market specific, agent seller relationship specific. And so again, while I support Zillow on their policy, it's not something we would try to then force upon all of our agents across the LPT ecosystem. We want to let them make that right choice for themselves and their client.
Yeah, I mean, it really is to kind of a luxury property, generally are the ones who want to do the private listings.
Yeah, I do think one comment I'll kind of make on this is I do see a fight happening where people who represent very different markets, right? To your point, yes, the agents who are primarily in luxury, they're representing properties that are over 2, 3, 4, 5 million, high net worth individuals, people who have a different idea around that are taking one stance. And then folks that are selling the median home price, are taking a different stance. And so again, I think that's where it really comes down to each agent's choice, each agent's decision with their consumer on how they're going to market their property. And because what I do love is like Zillow didn't come out and say, hey, we're going to ban that agent for life if they do this. They're saying, hey, that particular property will now be ineligible to go on Zillow. And I think that's an okay way to do it because you're letting the agent choose on a case-by-case basis. If the stance was, we're going to make every agent do this or we're going to throw them off of Zillow, that would be a different policy that I would probably have an issue with. But I'm supportive of the approach to say, look, you make the choice, but if you make that choice, we're going to then choose to not show your property. And I think that's how entrepreneurship works.
Yeah, definitely. And as an entrepreneur, this is a question I ask in every podcast. Obviously, you've had multiple aha moments throughout your careers in different companies. But what was the biggest aha moment that really stood out to you that caused you to maybe pause and shift gears and do something big?
Yeah, so while we were designing, so we made this decision all the way back in like 2018 or 19 that, hey, we were going to start to sunset listing power tools. We never closed it. We just stopped signing new agents up. We stopped promoting it and kind of let the attrition actually run off. We stopped innovating, stopped bringing out new products because we knew at some point in the future we wanted to become a brokerage. We didn't know exactly when that was. And so as the pandemic hit and the boom hit, the idea was, all right, when rates go up and the punch bowl gets taken away by the Fed, we know there's going to be a lot of pain in the industry. That's the right time to launch. And so the timetable started to come into focus. And then the idea was, well, what's the model going to be? And so we knew we wanted to be a brokerage. We knew we wanted to give listing power tools to our agents for free. We knew we wanted to win when they win, not have monthly fees. Like there were some core things that we knew. But then the big decision was there's two fast growing models, the 100% model and the rev share model. And while the rev share model is easier to see because EXP is single entity, Real is single entity. The 100% is a little harder to see because it's a lot of mom and pops. There's a lot of 100% brokerages across the country that have 800, 600, 1,000 agents. And so we did this big data project where we added them all together as best we could. And we realized they were actually growing faster during that period of time than even the fast growing recognized rev share brokerages were. And so for months, we were back and forth between the two. On one hand, it's like, well, the agent who wants to build a team, who wants to attract and build a downline and have an organization, that entrepreneur is drawn over here. And then agents who are really focused on their craft, they want to put as much money in their pocket as they can per closing, they're drawn over here. And you don't see a lot of teams at 100% brokerages, and you don't see a lot of the agents who are doing the less production at this type of brokerage. And I was back and forth. Like we were literally back and forth, back and forth. We had both models built. And then the aha moment was, let's do both. Like I remember I woke up, I called Matt, my chief strategy officer. I'm like, get over here. I figured it out. We're going to do both. And he has no idea what I'm talking about. He comes over to the house and I'm like, look, I figured out, like, this is how the two models can fit together and create harmony. And we let them choose and they can move up and they can move down. And these agents make rev share on those agents, but those agents don't make rev share on other agents. And it was really a big breakthrough. And I think that moment really set LPT up for everything we've been able to accomplish since then.
So I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm not going to tell you how long, but it's been a long time. And I remember when Zillow came to market. I remember when the tech was the biggest differentiator for brokers. It's table stakes now. I mean, it really has not, it offers value, obviously, but it's not the value that brings agents generally to a brokerage. But it's also very expensive, and you're self-funded, but you also, I think, produced built your own platform. So tell me a little bit about that and kind of the trial and error that went into it, or what did you learn doing that?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened early in my career is early in the mortgage days, there was a piece of software I needed. We were doing this niche type of lending, and I needed a piece of software, and I got a quote to build, and I couldn't afford it. And so I actually taught myself how to write code. I went down to Books a Million back in the day. I'm dating myself, right? Like back when there were bookstores, and
Yeah.
you went to the bookstore to buy books. Amazon wasn't a thing yet, and I bought every book on coding at my local Books a Million, and locked myself up in the house for a week and read them, and then wrote the piece of software. And I fell in love with coding through that process. And for me, it's like this hobby that relaxes me. So mortgage, real estate, title, everything that your subscriber base is in is chaotic, right? We can do everything right. You do everything right and something goes wrong.
Yeah.
You know, the sellers get divorced the day before closing. The buyer buys a new car, the whatever happens, right? So a medical collection pops up on their credit report at the last minute. We did everything right, but something went wrong. And so for me personally, the ability to write code was like soothing, like it brought order to the chaos. I would have these days at the mortgage company where we did everything right and it just seemed like everything went wrong. And then I would go write 1,000 lines of code. And when I hit go, if I did it correctly, it would do it right every single time. And there was just something balancing about that, something meditative about that. And so I wrote code and wrote more software. And it was a big part of the strength of the mortgage company was a lot of that software I wrote. And I got good at it. You know, I didn't go to college for it. I always had imposter syndrome, never thought I was good enough, whatever, but I got really good at it over decades. And so when we went to launch LPT, you know, built the software, I wrote the alpha version. I've got a dev team that comes in behind me and then helps take it to production. But the interesting thing is the cost to build software has come down dramatically. I mean, you look at the technologies that are out there, like we use Vue on the front end, you know, the back end frameworks that have been built, all of these things have really made it easier to build software. But where the big disconnect comes is the business logic not getting translated properly over into the software. And so because I can understand both and I can sit down with the dev team and as we're coding, we're making changes. Oh, wait, if it does this, that'll be better for the agent. Let's make it do that. And so I think that ability to understand the business logic and the code was a big part of us being able to do it at a much lower cost. We also had all of the development we've done for listing power tools. A lot of that technology, particularly on the marketing side, was able to just plug right in. But the cost to build software have come down dramatically. But I think a lot of brokerages are missing it. They're almost being taken advantage of by their dev teams or by their third-party development companies because there's such a disconnect between the business logic and the final product that they just end up wasting a lot of money. And we've been able to bypass that here and get a great product in the hands of our agents very quickly at a cost that didn't break the bank.
Well, it helps that you learned coding. So, gosh. So my last question is just, what is your growth strategy? What is your plan moving forward to take you to that next level?
Yeah, so we've got three big things coming out this year. You know, our Ascend University, which is the launch you witnessed here today, which is our goal is to be the #1 training brokerage in the country. Last year, Training Magazine recognized us in the top 100. We want to be the #1 brokerage in the country for training. We actually are sitting here in a former ITT Tech campus that we've converted to what we call our Ascend University. We're going to have 1,000 live events for Ascend this year. Available to agents at any brokerage on top of the education we do inside of LPT Realty. We think that's a critical part of where we're going. We're launching our luxury brand, Aperture. You know, that's a big part of where we're going. Aperture is a standalone luxury brand. So if you think on the LPT side, it's agent-centric, it's agent-first. Agent can take our logo and turn it whatever color they want. There's camouflage versions of the LPT logo out there in hot pinks and yellows. And we really think of that as the period at the end of the agent's brand or the team brand, and then they have complete control over the branding within state guidelines. Aperture is for agents who want that more brokerage brand. They want brand guidelines. They want to know that the Aperture agent in Denver's marketing looks similar to the Aperture agent in Miami, that and in New York. And so we really see it playing more in the higher end luxury market. Aperture is focused on competing with the Compasses and the Sotheby's and the Christie's. You know, it's interesting when we look at the market, Compass is #1 by volume. EXP is #1 by transaction count. You don't see a lot of agents moving between the two. And so instead of banging our head against a wall and saying, well, why can't we get all these Compass agents to come to LPT or these Sotheby's agents to come to LPT the way we've seen other cloud brokerages try, we're launching this second brand, Aperture, which is built to squarely compete with the Compasses and the Sotheby's and the Christie's and give that brand feel and give those production requirements for agents to be a part of the brand and really focus on that higher end market. So, you know, Michael Valdez joined us. That's a big part of his focus. We're launching Aperture globally, which has never been done before. Single entity luxury brokerage launching globally. And then finally, we have a product called Leads Connect coming out. again, I built my mortgage business by going on TV and radio and reinvesting profits and driving opportunities. We want to do that for our agents at LPT as well. And so we have this Leads Connect program that's going to be launching later this year as well. And then beyond that, we just continue to show up every day. We execute at a high level. We make sure our agents have a great experience. We make sure our tools continue to help them close that extra 2-3 deals a year that can make a difference in their personal P&L. We continue to respect their agent choice. We continue to support their individual definition of success. And I'm excited about the future.
Yeah. And if you're in the Florida market, if you haven't seen an RP funding commercial, then I don't know where you've been. So that's for sure. Well, Robert, thanks so much for joining the podcast today. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you, Tracey.